we know that Baroque ended with a bit of ornamentation. Even though it had a lot of elegance to it, it still involved a lot of decorations and stuff. So then came is Neoclassicism. So Neoclassicism was again going back to the classical architecture. So this was again restoration of classical antiquities. And now it had a lot of scientific backing as well. And this was not just like particular to a certain country or a certain region. It was an international movement. And a lot of architectural features were, it was not just classical architectures. They took inspirations even from Renaissance, a lot more inspiration from Palladian architecture works like Andrea Palladio's works. So they took a lot of inspirations from a lot of other architectural works, and that is how led to the international movement called the Neoclassicism. And it was called differently in different regions. Like in USA, it was Fedral style. And in Britain, it was called Regency style. And so on. So if you look at some of the example of Neoclassicism, I would point as Washington. No, I'll talk about Washington DC later. There is Buckingham Canal, London. Sorry, it's Buckingham Palace. And then there was a church called Saint Pancras, which featured caryatids. Now, caryatids was a feature that was present in the Erechtean temple of Acropolis in Greek. And these are like female figurines in place of columns. So this is an example of that. This one is Saint Pancras Church, and we have our Buckingham Palace. And if you talk about Federal style, it was deeply influenced by Thomas Jefferson. And some of the features of it is low hipped roof, low hipped roofs are like this. Okay, so gable roof is this, while a hipped roof is this, and they had really low height. So this height was very low. Then they had Palladian windows. Now Palladian windows were began or started in the Renaissance period, but they were also commonly found in the Federal style of USA. So what are Palladian windows? It has different names to it, but let's first talk about Palladian windows. It is usually divided into three with the arch in the middle. So this is your Palladian windows. And the other names for Palladian window is Venetian windows or Serlian window. It was called Serlian window because even Sebastiano Serlio also used it in a lot of his structures. I talked about Sebastiano Serlio on the last video. He was the one who designed the Chateau de Chamfort palace, his house, and he also used a lot of the Venetian windows. Then other feature is sash windows, which is nothing but a vertically sliding window. So this is the window, means they slide up and down. So that is your vertically sliding window called as the slash window. And this was most commonly found in their Washington Square. So some of the examples of Fedral style is our Washington, DC White House, and this is inspired from our Egyptian obelisk, and this is our Washington Monument. Designed by Robert Mills. And this you can very well guess inspired from Pantheon. And this is our Jefferson Rotunda in the University of Virginia. And this is Washington Square. And you can see sash windows here, and mostly the doors are also flanked by two columns, and it's a classical feature of all the Washington Squares found throughout all the places. Then we can move on to box art. So this started from École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And this did use a lot of classical antiquities, but also took inspiration from other architecturals as well. Like it took a bit of inspiration from maybe Gothic or Renaissance, whatever. And the idea of taking inspirations from inspiration from different architectural era, like taking one element from each era and combining them to a single building or a space, it is known as eclecticism. So eclecticism is the design philosophy that combines elements from different historical periods into a single building. So even though this was, again, as I talked about, this was revival of classical architecture. So classical architecture was predominantly present, but you can also see elements of other period here and there. And this architectural style was mostly used for designing public buildings, government buildings, train stations, etc. So example is, one is the Opera House in Paris, and another example is New York City's Grand Central Terminus. So this is New York City's Grand Central Terminus, and this is our Opera House in Paris, and it had another name to it, which is Palais Garnier. So this was, again, it involved a lot of symmetrical planning, lot of order, and strict adheration to the classical architecture and all of that stuff. Then came a movement, or another architectural style, that is Art Nouveau. So this came as a rebellion against the historical revivalism. So they were against all this. So they were against it. So this developed as a rebellion against revival of classicism. They believed that we need to have our own style, and they also wanted to use a lot of traditional handcrafted elements in the design, and not just strictly follow whatever that was constructed in the classical period. So they involved a lot of organic design, used a lot of whiplash lines. Now whiplash lines are lines that go like this. So they used a lot of whiplash lines, and they used modern materials, of course, like glass and steel. So they used modern materials, but with a handcrafted feel. Their planning were not just sticking to symmetrical. They used a lot of asymmetry planning. Asymmetrical planning. Their motives were a lot nature inspired. So nature inspired motives, and mostly they had whiplash lines. They all had like curves, use of lot of curves were there, and that's about Art Nouveau. Art Nouveau was also the one that influenced the arts and crafts movement. in British and the Japanese prints. So that led to the movement of art and craft in British and Japanese prints. Now if you see famous architects that followed Art Nouveau, one straight off is Antonio Gaudi. His famous Sagrada Familia, all his structures almost is Art Nouveau. Then we have Tada Ando. Sorry, not Tada Ando. Tada Ando is different style. We have Victor Orta's the Teisel House. So yeah, this is Tassel House by Victor Horta, and these are the whiplash lines. So and this is of course Sagrada Familia by Antonio Gaudi. So Art Nouveau involved a lot of ornamentation, but like handcrafted ornamentation and decorations, and were more organic. They had a lot of curves. They were against the revival of classicism. They were asymmetrical. Then came Art Deco, which was the opposite of Art Nouveau. So this was just before the World War I. And you could call them as the Machine Age era. So they used a lot of modern materials. They embraced the fast-paced production of materials, and thus involved a lot of it in their designs. Their structures are almost sleek, geometric patterns. And they used zigzag lines, and chevrons, etc. If you look at the materials, mostly they used are polished chrome, stainless steel, lacquers, and they used bold colors and bold and contrasting colors. So bold and contrasting colors. This had more earthy tones. So they used a lot of bold colors and bold and contrasting colors. Then Art Deco had a stripped down version of it, which was called as the streamlined modern. Is a version of Art Deco which was deeply inspired by the curving nature of aerodynamics. Curvings of aerodynamics. So this had designed a lot of ocean liners, airplanes and trains, etc. Now, due to Great Depression, and a lot of criticism from modern architects for the use of decorations, Art Deco was slowly declined. So famous buildings are Chrysler Building, this is Empire State Building, this is Capitol Cinema in Mumbai, you can see a lot of Art Deco buildings in India, in Chennai, in Mumbai, in all those places. Then these are streamlined trains and streamlined ocean liners. So these are streamlined train and streamlined ocean liners. Ocean liners are nothing but ships. You can see the curves that they used a lot even here. So that is about Art Deco. Now we can move on to early modern architecture. So modern architecture or early modern architecture believed in one thing, that is elimination of ornamentation. So they did not like the ornamentation anymore. They wanted sleek structures. Even as little ornamentation that was found in Art Deco, they did not like that. So they completely wanted it out. So elimination of ornamentation, and they had a lot of simplified forms. So that was about those two are the main important agenda of modern architecture. So if you see, industrial revolution happened, and that led to the mass production of materials, especially glass, and that brings us to our first building, which is the Crystal Palace by Joseph Paxton. I'm going to talk about a lot of iconic buildings that happened throughout or whatever architecture era that is gonna come up. So that's the main thing that I'm gonna talk about. So Joseph Paxton, this used a lot of iron and glass. Then we have our home insurance building. So home insurance building is the world's first skyscraper. So remember that. This is world's first skyscraper. World's first skyscraper designed by William Lee Barron Jenney. And this was what influenced our Chicago School of Architecture. This Chicago School of Architecture is a style that was found in most of the skyscrapers that was built, So if you see where, yeah, this is our Crystal Palace by Joseph Paxton, and this is your home insurance building. Then another, our main figure in the modern architecture is Louis Sullivan. The main principle of Louis Sullivan is form follows function. So function was given a lot of importance, and that is, you can even call it as functionalism, is the principle that architect should design a building based on the purpose of that building and not how it looked. So the first skyscraper, I'm not sure if it is the first skyscraper, but more, I think it is the first skyscraper. So Louis Sullivan designed as a 10-story structure called as the Wainwright building, which is this. And this was mostly done by using steel frame. And another architecture responsible for the skyscrapers in US is Daniel Burnham. So Daniel Burnham, he was also an urban planner, but the skyscraper that he designed, that became a lot of, that became kind of the most famous structure in US is the Flatiron building, which is this. So it had a triangular planning. I'm sure a lot of us would have looked, have seen this structure. So this is Flatiron building by Daniel Burnham. And then came Expressionism. This was to, the main purpose was to evoke a lot of very emotional response to a building. So this had a lot of very unusual massing. Was kind of organic, or you could say biomorphic forms. Had an utopian and a romantic socialist agenda. So the simplest way that I could explain Expressionism is about what it is not. So it is not symmetrical in any way, so it does not follow symmetry. It is not boxy. It had a very organic shape and stuff, and it had a lot of dramatic forms, focuses on the interiors a lot so as to evoke the strong emotional response. So focuses on interiors, and it uses materials like steel, concrete, glass, but also keeps them exposed. And most of the structures are inspired from natural elements like cave, mountains, or crystals. So this is an example for Expressionism. It's called Goetheanum by Rudolf Steiner. So this is Expressionism. Then I think we can move on to international style. Now, this does not belong to a particular architectural style or a particular it does not belong to a particular architectural style, and this was before our World War II. So this sort of compiled a lot of modernism architects and architecture. So you can call it as a constitute part of modernism. So this was a part of modernism. So one style that I'll talk about is Bauhaus school. Weimar. So this was founded by Walter Gropius. And then was joined by Hannes Meyer, and finally by Mies van der Rohe. And Bauhaus school style was deeply influenced by two things. One is De-Stilt, which was very abstract geometric forms, and use of just the primary colors, and something called as workbund. Now this was a movement or an effort made by the state in the Dutch country, so Germany. So this asked the architects to integrate traditional crafts with industrial mass production of materials. So Bauhaus school was deeply influenced by these two people, and you can also call it the international style as the Zeitgeist, which is the spirit of time and space. So if you see, this involved a lot of architects, as I talked about Mies van der Rohe. So this is your Farnsworth house in Illinois by Mies van der Rohe. And we have our Le Corbusier's Villa Sauve. And then Adolf Loos Villa Muller. Now, one famous thing about Villa Muller or Adolf Loos theory is the ROM plan, which is a planning technique of spacing out. It's basically spatial planning, and it's how you space out the interior of a house. So that was Adolf Loos. And then this, all of us know, F.L. Wright's Falling Water. And he was also the one who started the prairie style. Now, F.L. Wright style, if you see, it had strip of glass window, wide porches, wide balconies, open plan, and he used materials like wood, brick, plaster, glass. A lot of all that materials were used by F.L. Wright. And Adolf Loos was also the one who wrote the famous essay called Ornamentation and Crime. So that's about international architecture. So international style is basically a lot of architects and architectural style influence from the modern era. And some of them that I have mentioned here is the Bauhaus school and F.L. Wright's prairie style. And they strongly believed in ornamentation to be a crime, so that's there. So they use less ornamentation, less decorations. They use sleek structures that are more plain and that are more simple in form. So that's about international style or modernism. If you see postmodernism, then so postmodernism can be said as something like, so if modernism did not want to look back at all, did not want to take any sort of inspiration from any other era and want to just have this sleek simplified form, then postmodernism decided that you can look back, you can reinterpret the past and take inspiration from it, either reinterpret it either in a fun way or in a witty way. So that was mostly about postmodernism. So this reinterpreted historical styles and used mix of other architectural styles as well, and not just modernism. So one quote that perfectly fits postmodernism is wit, ornament and reference. So they did started involving ornamentation as well, something that was completely avoided in modernism. So if you see this is called Vanna Venturi house, designed by Robert Venturi for his mother. And this house was so iconic, and mostly because he used gable roof, like because in modernism a lot of structures were just flat roofed, and since he used involved elements that were from era that belonged before modernism, like the gable roof, this house was given the name of first postmodern building. Now, other example of postmodern architecture is our AT&T building, which is currently the Sony building, by Philip Johnson. So this this looked something like this. I forgot to take the picture, so I'm just trying to draw it off. That's how it looked. And one famous quote from Robert Venturi, since that's how he was the one who could be known as the pioneered postmodernism. So one of his famous quote is, "Less is more," which was completely the opposite of Mies van der Rohe's "less is more." So Robert Venturi said, enough with the less is more. Let's add elements to our structures because less is more. So that is postmodernism. Then we have something called metabolism. Now, metabolism, so the main ideation behind metabolism is that it views cities and buildings as living organisms that can grow, change and adapt over time. And so this considers buildings to be living organisms that can adapt or change and grow over time. So they had two elements, that is the permanent structure which they called as the mega structure, and they had smaller replaceable capsules, replaceable components called as capsules, and these capsules can be either added or subtracted as needed. And this metabolism was mostly followed or found in Japan in the 1960s. And some of the architects that advocated for it are Kisho Kurokawa, Kiyonori Kikutake, Fumiko Maki, and lastly Kenzo Tange. So all these architects, they were the advocates for metabolism. And one structure that I want to show for example is the Nagakin capsule tower by Kisho Kurokawa. So then comes our contemporary architecture style. Now this is no particular style. Like if you see international style, it you know mean it had modernism alone, but contemporary architectural style was not that. So this is no particular style. This just had a few characteristics to it, which is it used very advanced technology. It used computer aided design, and tube structures, which were allowed buildings to be much taller than it was before. So tube structures, all these could be said a part of contemporary architectural style. And contemporary architecture, it is global, so it is found in all parts of the world. Like for example, Burj Khalifa of Dubai is a contemporary architectural style, and Shanghai Tower in China, and it goes back and forth. So I'm just gonna mention famous architects that followed contemporary architectural style. So we have Frank Gehry, we have Renzo Piano, Shigeru Ben, Rem Koolhaas. Rem Koolhaas also designed and deconstructivism style, but we'll look into that later. So Rem Koolhaas and Santiago Calavatra. We have Daniel Libeskind. All these people also were part of deconstructivism. So we have Daniel Libeskind, Zaha Hadid, Norman Foster, and the list goes on, but I'm gonna stop now. So some of the structures is I talked about. We have Burj Khalifa, we have Shanghai Tower, we have Renzo Piano's The Shard, and Rem Koolhaas' Casa da Musica, and so on. So that's about contemporary architecture. Then there is we have critical regionalism. So critical regionalism is even until postmodernism and contemporary architecture, there was no sense of space or local materials involved or local design principles, anything of that sort. So critical regionalism advocated for that. So they wanted a sense of place, like a building that is how do I say, okay, for climate of this type, and for a building to be constructed in that place with that cultural importance, with that historic references, it has to be in a particular style. So that is about critical regionalism. So this took in considerations of topography, climate, light, and gave importance for tectonic dance, scenography, gave importance to tactile sense than the visual. So that is mostly critical regionalism. And if you see some of the architects, that is Tada Ando's Church on Water is a classic example of critical regionalism. Church on Water. So this is Church on Water. And other architect that I would like to mention is Jeffrey Bawa. His Kandalama Hotel, or even his own house in Lunaganga, all those are classic example of critical regionalism. And finally we have Deconstructivism. So this is a more fun, playful architectural style, and this wanted to break away from the rectilinear shapes. So rectilinear shapes were avoided, and a lot of non-Euclidean geometry was embraced. So they had a lot of curves, even if not just curves, but they were more abstract in shapes. And you could say it as unpredictability of the design, or it is also called as controlled chaos. And famous architect is Frank Gehry, Daniel Libeskind, even Zaha Hadid to an extent. She is more into fluidity, but some of her structures pertains to the deconstructivism style a lot. Then we have Bernard Suchumi, even Rem Koolhaas, etc. So example of deconstructivism is, so this is Dancing House, by Frank Gehry. And this is Guggenheim Museum, again by Frank Gehry. Then this is Imperial War Museum by Daniel Libeskind. So